Good evening, everybody, and welcome to what's going to be a wonderful evening. We're very happy to have a wonderful guest with us tonight, Mr. Ashley Robinson, who's joining us from Wimbledon tonight, and he'll be talking and sharing his knowledge and answering questions upon the birth of modern spiritualism. Ashley, thank you so much, sir. Very something to get used to with this online thing. I'm never quite sure to look at the camera, look at me, or look at you, but never mind. Ashley, we're looking forward to what's going to be a thoroughly enjoyable evening. It's one of the, I'm very reluctant to say benefits of this time because I'm always very mindful of actually why we're doing this. What is the underlying reason why we're doing that? So you must always pay due deference to that. But yeah, we are having to find what we're beginning to call now the new normal with things. And it is interesting. It is interesting, but in no way does it detract from nobody wanted us to be here in this condition at this time. However, we are ardent workers for spirit to bring over that truth and that understanding that life and love and ourselves are eternal. There is only the passing of the physical casing. The spirit, which is us, which is what motivates us, which energizes us, which gives us our character, our appearance, our way we are with people. That part has lived forever and shall live forever. So we're exploring all different avenues around that concept. So Ashley, sir, if I can hand over to you, please.
Good evening, folks, and thank you very much for joining us. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you, Lawrence, for inviting me. Some of you may know me. Some of you may be wondering who I am. So I thought I'd take the opportunity just to say a little bit about myself and what my journey has been so far in order to get this far. So my name is Ashley Robinson. I call myself a spiritualist medium. Very proud of the label spiritualist. But it's my label. It's up to absolutely anybody to put their own label in. I'm 38 years old this year, and I'm lucky to have been born into spiritualism and have a family and sort of nurturing supply, if you like, of spiritualist philosophy and spiritualism around me. I was always encouraged as a young child to be involved with the church in any way, shape or form, and equally not sort of punished or penalised for being away. I used to enjoy coming to the church. I know that I'll have some of what I call my church family listening today. And it felt incredible to have that additional family, people above and beyond my blood sort of line, if you like, people I'm proud to call family. I am the son of Ray and Jackie Robinson, two spiritualist ministers at Wimbledon Spiritualist Church in South London and Harwich Spiritualist Church. And I'm grandson of the late, and in my opinion, Derek Robinson, my grandfather. And my grandfather, Derek, was a real friend and mentor of mine, not just within the family, but within spiritualism. He was what I would describe as an ambassador for spiritualism. And a little bit about what he did in 1982 with some of his friends, Gordon Higginson, Doris Stokes, Jesse Nason. And that was to launch a new arm, a new organisation, a new arm of the Spiritualist Church called Life After Death Promotions. And the mission was simple: to share our knowledge of life after death, to prove there is a life after that change we call death, and share the truths and philosophy of spiritualism. And I'm really proud of that journey that LAD Promotions took, because it influenced me later in life, where I was able to continue some of the work that my grandfather had started. I spent most of my childhood being very aware of spirit. And again, in the same way that I say, I was encouraged to listen, to feel, to use all of my senses to be aware of helpers, angels, perhaps other kingdoms like the fairy kingdom. Dragons was a big part of my sort of childhood, and understanding how they could help and protect. My first element of really formal training was actually learning how to shut some of that down, how to close down. I was very well grounded and protected, but certainly by the time I was a teenager, I felt like I was open like a radio, which couldn't turn the volume down all the time. And one of my first lessons was to learn to attune better, to be able to turn it down and turn it back up. And actually, it was overwhelming. It was overwhelming to see and feel the Spirit all of the time. So doing that formal training as a young man, as a young teenager, was quite good. But actually, at the time, I remember saying that, I hope you don't mind, Mum and Dad, but don't be offended if I don't follow in your footsteps. I'm not sure this is all for me. I absolutely believe in a life after death, but that's probably as far as it's going to go. Fast forward till I was about 18 years old, and two significant and tragic events happened in my life with my friends. And one of my friends was murdered outside a pub on Easter Sunday. And another one of my friends was killed in a car crash when the car she was in lost control and hit a tree. So I lost two friends to spirit. To say lost, I know exactly where they were, but it really put a test on my faith. I had a great belief in a life after death. At 18, I actually didn't know that many people that were dead. I'd seen lots of people get messages. I'd sort of understood the philosophy. And as well as me wanting that proof from them that their lives continued after death, I wanted to know why. I started questioning the understanding of the universe as I knew it. And that really set me on quite a philosophical path in an attempt to understand the universe better. And that really changed my spiritualist life. I started sitting in circle. I sat in circle with a couple of different people, but Christine Woodham, who's now in Spain, the Reverend Christine Woodham, who had worked at the Greater World Christian Spiritual Association. She had led me in circle, as had Mary Dixie, a great ambassador for spiritualism, tutor at our church in Wimbledon. And then with Jill Hay, my godmother, right up until she passed away, she was teaching circle. I've also been lucky enough to be surrounded, as I say, by spiritual people and spiritualists. I've done lots of opportunities to work in and around Wimbledon and Hatbridge Spiritualist Church with all of the mediums that I call friends that have come in and out of those churches. And it was only really probably about 10 years ago I started working publicly. And this is where I sort of finish with the intro, because for me, I suffered a stroke, a major brain attack. I killed 1/3 of the brain cells on the left-hand side of my head. And everything went absolutely bananas. I had no real recollection at the time. It started off with a bit of a backache and the feeling that I was kind of getting drunk inside my body while my mind was quite sober. Quite a scary thing. But my parents, my wife, quickly told that there was a chance I wasn't going to survive, that I was going to die. And I'm glad that they didn't give me that plain English at the time. I was very aware it was serious. 2 days after the major stroke, they finally got the MRI results where they'd sort of said, you've killed these brain cells and they don't come back. And I went to sleep that night and I asked for help. I knew that by that time, between my mum and dad had sort of started that domino effect, as I call it. Can you please, send love and light to my son? Please put out healing, text message, phone calls. And I was fortunate enough to probably have hundreds, if not thousands of people all continuing to send me that love, to send me that unconditional love, that beautiful light and healing. And what happened that night, I can only describe as my own little miracle, because it was as if the room filled with light and energy. I was plugged into the mountains and I just started to feel better. I was asleep, but very aware that I was being repaired and being fixed. I woke up that morning, actually jumped out of bed, showered and shaved before the doctors had even come round, and they sent me off for another MRI. And what the doctor said to me later that day was that I'd had a spontaneous recovery, that no human intelligence was involved, but they were pleased to see that parts of my brain that weren't previously in full operational status now were. And I later read that phrase in a book by Larry Edwards, a fantastic spiritual healer. And he spoke about spontaneous recovery as being a doctor's way of describing the power and effect, the impact of spiritual healing. And it was at that point that I really wanted to change what I was doing. I wanted to work more with the church. I wanted to work more outside of the church. Paul Sassell, a great medium down on the south coast in Portsmouth, encouraged me to come to his unit, encouraged me out of my comfort of Wimbledon and Hatbridge churches, and got me to do my first public dem outside of that environment, and had lots of opportunities out spiritual and psychic weekends. Keith Charles had been working with my grandfather for the last sort of 25, 30 years. We had this brilliant annual retreat, and I was always encouraged by people like Keith and my granddad, obviously my mum and dad, Ivan Lee, been a great support. And every now and then just giving that gentle push, gentle push, gentle push. And that's fast forward to where I am now. And the final name I just wanted to mention, also in spirit now, is Ralph A. Steadman. And Ralph kind of came into my life around the time of me wanting that new understanding of the universe. And he's become a brilliant teacher for me on earth, and now he's in heaven. I get lots of influence from him. So that's a little bit about me. Probably went on a little bit longer than I wanted to. And Lawrence, you've invited me here this evening to talk about the modern birth of spiritualism.
Yes, indeed. Absolutely fascinating. Lovely introduction. And no, it did not go on at all too long. I'm always amazed, actually, how many mediums and workers for spirit have been born into spiritualism out of a really hard time of our lives, be it personal, physical, emotional, whatever. But it's almost like that's our challenge. You know, we have that one occurrence in our life, and it's sort of like, what are you going to do about it? You know, are you going to accept it for what it is, or are you just going to carry on and think, maybe? So, yeah, absolutely fascinating. Thank you. But yes, continue on with your talk. You don't want to hear me. They hear me all the time.
Okay. I want to talk a little bit about modern birth of spiritualism. As part of that talk is I want to define the word modern, because I don't believe that anything we're doing is necessarily new. We might be doing it in this life for the first time. I think that a lot of what spiritualism is doing as part of its evolution, as part of its growth and its transition, it's more of an awakening to things that we may have known and well practiced. Because as far back as history goes, and our religion is a big part of the history, it was often the victors in history that wrote the history books, and there were some big victors in and around, you know, the major religions of the time. But as soon as man, woman wanted to believe in something greater than themselves, there is this sense of a great architect or a supreme being, something greater than themselves. And although spiritualism, people would say, is a relatively sort of modern term, I find that spiritualism, certainly for me at the moment, I'm proud to call myself a spiritualist, acts more like an umbrella. And I've been lucky enough to meet people from all different parts of the world that also call themselves different things. They have different labels. But recently I've started to hear people call them maybe a Catholic spiritualist, or a Hindu spiritualist, or a Muslim spiritualist, particularly when they come for private readings, or nothing at all, just that they have an open mind. And as I sort of start that journey on what is modern spiritualism and the terms we use and what it sort of defines, I couldn't do that without mentioning some of the ambassadors along the way. And I'll be talking a little bit about the Fox sisters at Hydesville and some of their early communication. And I'll be mentioning some other people, some of my sort of heroes within spiritualism, people like Sir Arthur Conan Doyle and the Reverend George Van Lowen. Helen Duncan is someone that I think only goes back as sort of far as the Second World War. But if you talk about the modern birth of spiritualism, in chats with her granddaughter recently, there was certainly a lot of fundamental changes with Helen Duncan. So if you think about the Fox sisters then, I think that in terms of the birth of modern spiritualism, we're still going back to around 1848, and we're talking about the start of sort of modern spiritualism. March the 31st, in particular, 1848, and I'll take you to New York, Hydesville in the USA. And the sisters, Leah, Kate, and Maggie. And what happened at their house was incredibly unusual for the time. Orthodox Christianity, if you want to call it Orthodox Christianity, had taken a bit of a foundation. There was a belief in a life after death, that place called heaven. But religion was almost exclusive to the well-off and the well-to-do and the well-educated. The Bible and bits of the Bible that had been interpreted, it was still, a school of thought, but not everybody should be able to read from such a precious document. And actually sharing things, like I said there, the truths of spiritualism, the philosophy, there was more of a doctrine of people need to do what we tell them to do and sort of how to do it. But the sisters were very important, and the sisters were mischievous. They were young girls. They were living in the same room. But what they kind of stumbled across almost by accident was an intelligent energy, if you like, something which they couldn't physically see. But what they started to hear was the manifestations of physical phenomena, as we call it today, which was a knocking and a rapping of the door. Now, there's lots you can read about the Fox sisters and Hydesville. Most spiritualists in 2020 would celebrate what we call Hydesville Day and that sort of birth point. But there are very different sides to the story. One side of the story is that all of those knockings, which actually made the sisters incredibly famous, were totally fraudulent. The sisters, the girls themselves, even admitting at one point that they'd made it all up. But actually, if we focus on the facts, we focus on almost accidental mediums, people that weren't necessarily looking for fame, but young girls trying to get a better understanding of this intelligence energy. And the fact that these knockings were intelligent, you could communicate the sense of asking questions. When you think about our mediumship now, and there's lots of people working online, how quickly, how dynamically we can engage with someone. But imagine having to say, give me 1 knock for A and 26 for Z. Give me 1 knock for yes and 2 for no. Just imagine how long it would have taken to have developed any type of message or communication. Actually, through patience, a little bit of fame, it became infectious. People all over the world started hearing about these knockings, and they wanted to know more. Now, I said I'm going to focus on facts. My opinion is that the fame became too much for them. It overwhelmed them, and it was an easy escape to say they made it all up. But later on, they did actually say that they'd actually made up the making it up bit. The intelligence and the knockings had been real. And that house still exists. It's part of a spiritual retreat now in New York. And the important thing from that message for me is that through this intelligence, the girls discovered that a young peddler had been killed. He'd been murdered in the house, and his body was buried there. This peddler had gone missing. All of these facts led up to this, and it was the master of the house. Looks like they'd probably stole his money and buried his body. When that house was dug up in that basement, they did find the remains of who they believed to be that peddler. And it was that peddler looking for a little bit of justice to tell his story, his point of making contact. Now, while 1848 was what I'm saying as a start of modern spiritualism, I throw in that caveat that nothing is necessarily new. In 1848, the whole world as people understood it changed. To coin a phrase, it was a black swan moment. The Brits for a long time had always assumed that there were only white swans, and that was the world as we knew it. And then in Australia, they stumbled across a black swan. I call it the black swan moment because black swans can suddenly appear out of nowhere, and it can change everyone's understanding. And that's exactly what happened with the knockings at Hydesville. And it inspired people to do this. The girls claimed to be nothing in particular special. They were what we'd call now in modern spiritualism mediums. And they had the patience and the discipline to continue to work with this energy to try and pass on that message. And I think that it's really quite incredible. Another person I want to mention, so that was 1848, but Emanuel Swedenborg, born 1688 to 1772. He was a Swedish scientist, a philosopher, a mystic, a politician, an inventor, and a writer. And the reason I want to talk about him is one of his books, Heaven and Hell, which was actually written in 1758. Unpublished plans for a flying machine and a submarine in this book. He spoke about seeing heaven, seeing that place we go to after that change we call death. And he spoke about astral travel in his dreams. So although I talk about this sort of birth of modern spiritualism, I couldn't do that without mentioning him. The other really important ambassador, I think, of this journey is Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Born in 1859, he was a writer, doctor, and of course most famous for being an author of Sherlock Holmes. He became an ambassador and an advocate for spiritualism and a psychic researcher. And he continued to do what I think we do today, which is to challenge the status quo, to try and raise that level of what we call burden of evidence, burden of proof. And I think he was an incredible man. Spiritualism, say through Hydesville, suddenly was available to every man and woman, regardless of their status in life. It showed that spirits weren't particularly fussy, that they would work with anyone. You didn't need to have been born of a particular family and gone through a huge amount of discipline and education, that there was this ability to communicate with spirit, because in essence, our bodies, our souls, after that change we call death, it was that soul and that spirit that continued to live on. The other person who's very important to me, particularly around this sort of birth of then modern spiritualism, how it started to evolve and change, is the Reverend George Vale Owen. Now, for anyone that's ever visited Women in Spiritualist Church or hopes to in the future, you'll notice that our sanctuary is named after the Reverend Vale Owen. He was born in 1869, and he was a priest with the Church of England. And he was effectively given the assignment to disprove spiritualism. This wasn't very good for the Church of England. You've got to remember all of the history right back to Henry VIII and Catholicism and being a Protestant, people being sort of killed for not doing the right thing or doing as they told. And you've suddenly got these people saying that actually this was a challenge on the Church of England's status quo. So he was set off to go and disprove it. Prove it's a load of old, bananas. But what he did as he started to get involved in this, he became an automatic writer. He was influenced heavily by spirit, who saw this as an incredible opportunity to have someone that was already involved in a traditional sort of set-up church and try to influence him. And actually, I would argue that even in sort of 2020, many of what we would call priests and vicars and ministers at various churches were all claiming to have an inspiration or inspired. These people get up and do incredible jobs with their sermons and their addresses. There are people that say that through prayer that they can commune with angels. For me, at the lowest possible level, that is mediumship and communication. And I would argue that almost every major religion, and even some of the smaller religions, rely on some element of, we take our insight from our ancestors or our guides or the gods. And I think that Reverend George Vale Owen, doing what he did, he published a book called Beyond the Veil. And effectively, you can read this report now. It's only just been released by the Church of England. It effectively says, do you know what? First thing is, there's absolutely nothing incompatible between the Church of England and spiritualism. Spiritualism continues with our belief in heaven. It goes on to prove there is a heaven and that these people not only live and continue their lives in heaven, but they're around and they're happy to advise us and guide us and steer us should we desire. They have all this philosophy which is compatible with the Church of England. So I think he was an incredible ambassador. He ended up being removed from the Church of England, which was really sort of sad for him, sort of poor and penniless. But he was picked up by people, and spiritualists ended up grabbing hold of him, hanging on to him. Very clever, intelligent man. And as part of sort of telling this story and thinking about the Church of England, thinking about the sort of Catholic Church, I do think that we continue to have this inspiration from angels. Some of what you would say are very special places, which even as a spiritualist, you'd say a place like Lourdes, wow, incredible energy, great sort of healing properties. I mean, at a core level, you could say that when the person saw the Mother Mary there, what they were seeing was spirit, the spirit of the Mother Mary influencing them. I recently learned a bit more about Mormons, some of it fact, some of it fiction, through the theatrical story, the Book of Mormon, and I went off and did a bit of research. And you've got someone, claiming to have received some information from God, heaven, on golden plates they had to then, hide and sort of not tell anyone about. But actually, for me, the important thing was the message, and the message he received from something greater than himself, which I believe is the spirit world. You could argue that, although I'm using a tablet today and Lawrence is streaming this on cloud, one of the first people to do that was probably Moses. You know, he took all that information from the cloud and put it on his tablets. And you know, that for me again was continued information from the spirit world. Jesus himself was you know, for want of 2020 spiritualist words, was a spiritual healer. He not only helped people and cured them, he's claimed to have brought people back from the dead. He spoke about advising his disciples and receiving messages. He spoke about God as his father. But I think he also, depending on which bits of the Bible you read and put it together, he also speaks about God being all of our Father, and how he prepares the house for all of us, and how within this mansion there are many houses, all these sort of different levels of it. So I think all of these incredible teachers, all these incarnations of people throughout history have all sort of contributed towards this. But for me in spiritualism, I wanted to finish the sort of, if you like, the birth part of this story with Helen Duncan. Helen Duncan, absolutely incredible physical phenomenon medium. Born in 1897, she was a wife, her mother. She was a physical medium. She was also the last person to ever be imprisoned in the UK under the Witchcraft Act in 1735. What an old piece of legislation, 1735, to have been imprisoned during around the Second World War. Now, Second World War, like the First World War, saw a mass exodus of people dying and people going to heaven. There was an awful lot of work for Spirit to do to prepare for that. Some of our guides and I think it was Zodiac spoke about the fact that this war was not just against an enemy, it was against an evil, and this evil that has to be extinguished. So you could argue that you know, there was no such thing as good guys and bad guys, but there was an evil which needed to be defeated. And what Helen Duncan was able to do with her physical mediumship was to give people absolute proof of life, of loved ones lost during that battle. And one of the things that allegedly got her into trouble was not the fact that she was a fraudulent medium and imprisoned on the Witchcraft Act, but that she was too accurate, that she was providing immediate evidence of someone's continued life after that change we call death. And it's claimed that during a physical circle, she was able to give evidence of a sailor who had died in a ship which had been sunk by the Germans. And she even allegedly manifested this sailor. You could make out the insignia of their rank and their number and the ship that they were on. Now, this turned out to be absolutely true. But what Helen had done is effectively broken the Official Secrets Act, because the Ministry of Defence, the Department of War, had not released that information yet. This ship and its sinking was a very strategic part of the war. And what they decided at that time is we needed to stop Helen Duncan from continuing to do this. It was undermining the war efforts. This isn't good for morale. And not only was she imprisoned, she was treated terribly. And in an attempt to try and disprove her, she was raided. Her house was raided during one of her seances. And it was at a time where she was allegedly producing a physical substance, so ectoplasm, something outside the body that people could see. And there was such a shock involved in that. The police officers allegedly tried to grab the ectoplasm to prove it was fake, only to see that it was this energy coming out from her body. It made her very unwell. And people would say that she died much younger than she should have done. And a lot of people will attribute it to that rate. But she dies, leaving a huge impact on spiritualism. It was a time that physical mediumship was building up, and lots of people started to do it. But as you can imagine, physical mediumship and seance almost stopped. They certainly went into hiding, and perhaps because of that element of hiding, and people, you know, looking for preservation of their own lives, started to do this behind closed doors and didn't tell people about it. And perhaps that added to the mystery of spiritualism, but this doubt that, oh, if it was a problem, anyone could do it, and you would kind of have it out here. But I think she was an incredible woman, a great ambassador. I mentioned in my background my grandfather. I think that him and many others like him doing what they did in the 70s and 80s, which was taking mediumship as it had started to develop and taking it out to the people. The founder of Women of Spiritualist Church was a guy called Richard Bush. And Richard Bush, being a very well sort of learned man with a couple of quid 100 years ago, had started using the Ouija board. Now, the Ouija board had kind of grown to fame as a bit of a Victorian parlour trick. It kind of fast-tracked the knockings and allowed all of that energy to be concentrated on some sort of glass where you could quickly spell out a message. I say quickly, it was very quick for the Victorians, but if any of you have ever used a board in the right circumstances, actually it takes forever to spell out a message on a board. And again, that kind of influenced what people were starting to do, because people like Richard Bush would sit there on his board all night and they would end up getting messages like "found a mission in Wimbledon." And Richard Bush was able to find a room above a stable in Wimbledon just over 100 years ago, and was told by spirits that there'd be some land coming up, that you should buy this land and build that a church there. And people like him were incredible ambassadors to this. This was a huge building, one of the biggest spiritualist churches in Europe at the time when it was built, purpose-built as a sort of spiritualist church. People like that continue to help spiritualism evolve into the movement, the philosophy, the religious organization it is today. Many people will say that spiritualism is far more than a religion; it's a way of life. And people like Richard Arthur Bush, they made it that way of life. There were great things happening with the creation of things like the Psychic News and other brilliant newspapers. People that started talking about this, that started sharing the message, that getting out of it. Everybody taking a bit of spiritualism away, realizing it wasn't particularly special to one person, planting seeds, setting up in their homes, hiring the local hall, building churches. This movement was contagious, and people were wanting to share the knowledge they had of life after death, to promote spiritualism and some of the truths within that. Boris Stokes, Gordon Higginson, Jesse Nason, some brilliant, incredible mediums and providers of evidence life after death, taking that spirit of what they were doing in churches and taking it out to the people and letting them know that you don't have to come into the church because spirit were around you, they're your communicators, they stay with you. I think they were incredible people, and they certainly made it more of a common day thing. You could walk into your high street and go into a theatre and you could see Doris Stokes or Gordon Higginson. People like Harry Edwards doing incredible spiritual healing in Leicester Square in the middle of the day, showing that nothing needed to be hidden. And I wanted to just finish by mentioning a couple of other people, and regardless of what you think about their TV lives, they're what I call TV celebrity style mediums, people I've had the honour of meeting, that have definitely aided to that modern birth of spiritualism. People like Derek Akora, probably one of the best known TV mediums, a great ambassador for spiritualism. And so regardless of what you think about some of the shows he was on, that man lived his life to prove there was a life after death and to share his knowledge of that life after death. Him, people like Colin Fry and others that continue to do it, Tony Stockwell, by getting spiritualism and that evidence onto TV, made it more accessible to even more. They encourage mediums to come forward, for people to sit down and to do this, to go and find their local spiritualist church. Now, if you can go and see Derek Akora in a theatre, Derek would often finish by saying, "Now go and support your local spiritualist church." Colin Fry did the same. Some of those people that are still alive continuing to do that. That's exactly what it's about. And Lawrence, you kind of started us off by saying about the strange time we're all in. And I'm certainly not in a rush to go back to the way I was living my life before. I do miss, being able to physically embrace my mum and dad and, give my sister a kiss and stuff like that. Actually, there's this sense of this new normality, and there's this exciting opportunity. And, I look at my Facebook wall, which is full of, friends from rugby or civil service or spiritualism. And what I see is that anyone with access to a webcam can go live, can share their version of spiritualism and the truths of this, can demonstrate their mediumship. You've got people like you, Lawrence, hosting this, Richard James with Spiritual Productions, TV channel that is free and has had something like 400,000 people now watch dozens of different mediums and meditations. What an incredible thing to be able to do what we're doing, to talk about what we're talking, to have that freedom of speech, to say what we believe with the caveat that it's my own sort of personal, humble opinion. And, I, for one, are excited by that. I genuinely think there is a new normality to go into. I'm excited to be part of that awakening. I'm excited that more and more people are looking to their mind's eye to open up to the possibilities, to look into that new understanding of the universe, to challenge the status quo and ask for evidence. And that's exactly what I want to do. I'm very excited that I've just put in an application to study to become an ordained minister with United Spiritualists. And I think back to that conversation. I said, Dad, I hope you won't be offended if I don't follow in your footsteps. And now there's me asking for help to become a minister. And that is to take that journey forward, to continue to do what we do, to tell people about that life we have after this change we call death, but to focus on the life we also have now. We only get to live this life once. And while I do believe in the ability to incarnate or reincarnate, we only live this life once. And we're here for many, many purposes. Let's awaken. Let's find that true purpose. Let's go off and explore absolutely everything that we can in pursuit of happiness. Let's do things that make us happy with people that make us happy, assuming it's all lawful and legal and morally right. Go forward and tell people. Thank you, Lawrence, for the opportunity to talk today.
Ashley, wow, absolutely wonderful. Wonderful comments coming in. Totally enthralled. It's so nice to hear our spiritual history coming to life. You said a word earlier on, and I thought, oh yes, thank you. Intelligence. This is something, you know, I feel some people sorely miss with spirit. It is an you know, we are dealing with intelligent beings. Quite often you get people saying, well, I keep hearing knocking in my room. What do you think it is? I said, well, I don't know. Go back and ask. It's an intelligent, it's an intelligent person trying to communicate with you. Yeah. So actually, you need to respond to that, and also
rule out the supernormal, like the heating coming on, and then once you've ruled out the supernormal, look for some supernatural, as you might call it.
Indeed, 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 and the way that we work with spirit as well. This time, as I said in our preamble before we came live on air, you know, this is a very interesting time. I did say a little while back, in a way, we are now creating some new pioneers for spiritualism for working this way. You know, pre the pandemic, most people would have avidly avoided coming on. Oh, yeah, you can't do that online. But actually, you think about it, you're dealing with spirit. You know, you're dealing with this limitless energy. So the fact that we're sat here online, actually, do you know what? It's not hindering them in the slightest, because we are receiving that philosophy, that inspiration. I always say to people, you know, we are all mediums. We may not be the mediums that get up on a platform and deliver that evidence, but we can be mediums of inspiration, mediums of philosophy, you know, mediums in the medical field, that inspirational moment, hopefully that somebody will get one day with our current affliction and go, oh, hang on a minute, I never thought of that. And that is spirit working with us, you know, great and small ways. So, wow, absolutely wonderful, 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 wonderful. We have a lovely question here from Jackie White. Gosh, there's a lot of comments coming. There we go. About God. Can you see the comments on your screen, Ash?
I can't at the moment. Let me see if I can change my my view. There we go. So, hi, Jackie. If we all have guardian angel with all of us life, is it someone we have known in a previous life? And do you think, how does someone choose who they'll be with all their life? And do you mind if you are not tuned into knowing guardian angel? Okay. So, Lawrence, you might even want to add something to this, but I'm going to add the caveat that this is my honest, humble opinion. But my humble opinion has kind of evolved over a period of time from my own guides. Now, I mentioned a guy called Ralph A. Steadman, who's a brilliant author, has written several books. Ralph, I believe, continues to guide me from heaven. And some of the things that I learned through Ralph, some of the things I've had confirmation from myself, is this concept that we all have at least one principal guide. Now, let's assume that as a spiritualist, we all accept the fact that one of the greatest things we can do to show that unconditional love is to provide service, to do something unconditional for someone else. It's one of the greatest things we can do. Assuming then that incarnation is possible, why wouldn't you, once you get to heaven, want to dedicate you in service to a new human being, Newman, the new human being, and dedicate you as their guide to their entire life? What an incredible thing to do. So I believe that we all have this absolute principle guide. And some of us are lucky enough to know them by name and understand them. They may have shared things around the personality they had when they walked the earth, assuming that they walked the earth. But I'll be honest, and I'm working medium. I don't know my principal guide by a name and a personality. What I do know is that my instinct, my intuition, when I allow my body, my heart, my brain, all of those things to work in juxtaposition with my instinct and my intuition, that is the time I believe my principal guide, my guardian angel, is helping me to do the right thing in the right situation. It's at that time that I close my eyes and close down my senses and open my mind's eye, that place where I store the shopping list and that TV program I want to watch. It's at that point that my guardian angel, my principal guide, can step forward. And lots of people would talk about this principal guide being the first person you need to meet when learning to open up as a medium. The important thing for me is, almost like in any education, is you find someone that can teach you something, and that you understand that you're never going to learn it all. You have this appetite for continually learning, continually improving. And my principal guide that I know by personality was someone that I knew while I was alive. It was my godfather, a guy called Bob Brunton, a brilliant healer and medium. He was the first guide I was able to address and identify by name or personality when I was starting to work. And I see him as my doorkeeper, as my bouncer. He staffs the waiting room in heaven for people that want to give messages. Now, that doesn't mean that he isn't taking orders from my guardian angel. I still don't know. But I do believe we all have that principal guide. And at a core level, if you've ever felt led by your instinct or your intuition, by your heart, I think that's the time that our principal guide, our guardian angels are with us. And what an incredible service to do for someone for their entire life. Hopefully that answers your question, Jackie.
Absolutely. I think you covered that extremely well. You know, our spiritual development is continuous, all sides of life, this side and the next side. I had a very interesting experience with somebody, and I suddenly realized that I was actually acting as a physical guide for them while they were in spirit at this time. And I found that fascinating. That it's just suddenly somebody said, "You're his guide." And I went, "How can I? I'm here." And they went, "Well, you don't have to be over there." And I thought, yeah, that figures. You know, we're learning. We are learning. Yeah. Probably one of the reasons why, when we all suffer it, don't we? When the guides change, that is every medium's sort of like, oh, they're doing it differently. Oh no, here we go. Because we want to learn a different aspect and teach us a different aspect. But as we learn, we are also teaching as well. So yeah, lovely comments on there. Lots of questions coming in. Wonderful. Just need to scroll down. Where are they? Oh, here we go. There's a nice one. Do you have a must-read book you would recommend?
Follow your instinct and sort of intuition. But, you know, some of the books that have meant a lot to me, Harry Edwards. Harry Edwards has written some brilliant books. What I love about Harry Edwards is he comes across as an uber intelligent, incredibly intelligent man, but he has the ability to describe quite difficult, complex things in plain English. And he wrote a lot of pamphlets in his life around, for want of a better word, an idiot's guide to being a healer, an idiot's guide to being a medium. He breaks it down into a very, very simple silence. So anything by Harry Edwards, I definitely recommend. He's been a big influencer from me. I should also admit to the fact I've got two little boys now, a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. I've actually not read a book properly in 5 years. I just don't seem to find the time. I mentioned a couple of people that that influenced my life growing up. People like Doris Stokes. Doris Stokes was just as famous an author as she was a medium, and lots of people would say that her books kind of made her even more famous as a medium. So she's written some beautiful stories. And actually, lots of the books are available now. You often pick them up in sort of the charity shops when they reopen. Doris Stokes actually gave me my spirit name. After a den one night with my grandfather, she came home with my dad. I'd just been born, and my dad had said, "Well, don't disturb him. Ashley's asleep." So she went up to my room, woke me up so she could have a cuddle. And she talks about this in her book, but she talks about the fact that Spirit then gave her my spirit name. And for those of you that have never been baptized within spiritualism, one of the things we do in lots of churches is, as well as our given names on our birth certificates, we get a name from Spirit to go with it. So I'm really lucky that Doris Stokes to be able to do that. And lots of her books again give some really quite brilliant stories. And most recently, the stuff I've been reading is by the late and great Ralph A. Steadman. In fact, the only book I've got, the last book he wrote before he died, Spiritualism Under the Microscope. And this is more of a manual than a book. It's almost like the A to Z of things in spiritualism. And what he tried to do was to kind of, again, explain things in a really simple science, the difference between psychic and clairvoyant, the difference between guides and guardian angels and spirit helpers. But anything you feel drawn to, that is the honest answer, because all these authors talk to us in a slightly different way.
Yeah, very true. I always advise everybody, simplicity really is the key to it. We get sometimes I think we get a little bit too immersed on reincarnation. That's always a topic. And if it feels right for you, fine. It is right for you at this time. If it doesn't, absolutely fine. Don't worry, but just nice and simple. My tip for a book is Magician to Mystic. Absolutely brilliant. Came out about 2 years ago, and it really was a game changer for me. And I love reading. I used to read, you're talking about Vale Owen, Highlands of Heaven, Battalions of Heaven, and all the books like that. I was weaned on those. But this new one, Magician to Mystic, I just found really, it was just like Harry Edwards. I've got his pamphlet on Guide to Mediumship. Lovely. Do you know what? And anybody in my circle, I said, you need to read that. If you're going to go on this path, read that, because that is sensible. We're not away with anything. It's just black and white, plain English, like it or lump it. But yeah, very good, very good, very good. Julie Watmole. Any tips for seeing spirit?
Hi, Julie. Good evening, and good evening to you. It's really great that you've all joined us. I'll go back and look at all the comments later. So do let us know as well where you're watching Lawrence's show from tonight. So in terms of seeing spirit, don't give up. Keep trying. As I said earlier on, they're not fussy. They will work with absolutely anyone, and they want to work with everyone. Is what I believe. But it's like a radio. And, it takes a while to find the right frequencies, to jump between the stations, to know how to go back. And it all boils down to this ability to attune. So, from a basic sort of concept in circle, and Lawrence, I know you're a tutor, so correct me if I'm wrong, but the idea of never seeing anything doesn't exist. To quote my circle leader, I think Mary Dixie or Jill said this to us. Used to sit next to my sister sometimes in circle. She used to call herself the psychic dud. She'd close her eyes and go, I don't see anything. And I think Jill said to her, what do you see? She goes, nothing. She goes, well, you must see something. She goes, black. She goes, well, black is a colour, so you see something. And I think it's this idea of playing catchphrase when it comes to spirit. Now, I'm actually quite keen to see something spooky. I really love the concept of physical phenomenon. But even when I've been trying with the right people in the right circumstances, I think to physically see some type of physical phenomenon takes an awful lot of time, an awful lot of discipline, an awful lot of energy. So in terms of seeing spirit with your eyes, I think it's incredibly difficult. And it's often in the glimpse of an eye that I see them. I see almost all of my spirit communication in my mind's eye. And, the mind's eye is a place, I said, where you store your shopping list. But closing your eyes and going back to your memories to think about what you had for dinner yesterday, that itself is the mind's eye. And it's about clearing that. It's about seeing that mind's eye as a palette or a blank canvas, and then allowing spirit to influence. And although sometimes spirit have come so incredibly close, I can sort of smell them or describe them or even feel their ailments. Almost always it starts with them accessing my own memories. It's like a slideshow. Everything I've ever seen, experienced, heard, smell, all of that already exists in my memory. And it's easy for spirit to go there. You know, for an example, let's say I was giving someone a private reading, rather than for that person's granddad to come forward and say, this is what I look like, I'm their granddad. The easiest thing to do is to then show a picture, a memory of mine, of my own granddad. And if it was their dad's dad, they'll show me my dad's dad. If it was my mum's, nan, I see that. Now, unless that person knew my granddad, the chances are that spirit influencing my memories, like a slideshow, picking the right thing to sort of try and influence me. So great that you want to see spirit and have tried. Keep looking for things that are already there. Keep looking in plain sight. Continue to challenge the status quo. When you're not seeing spirit, what are you seeing? Is it color? Try and get yourself into a meditative state if you're able to meditate. Guided meditation's an incredible gift. If you're able to go off on those journeys, brilliant. I always find that I'm still 10 minutes in getting rid of the shopping list. So I personally have a discipline which isn't great for this. But when you get to that calm meditative state, it's so much easier to clear the canvas and start to see something. And, work with what you can see. So if you can't see anything but the inside of your eyelids, what color is that? And what does that color mean to you? So, Julie, hopefully that gives you a couple of tips. The other thing to do, of course, is to walk into your local spiritualist church, or at the moment, stay at home and stay alert, stay safe. Find your local spiritualist church online, make contact with some of their helpers and some of their tutors, and get yourself involved in a circle. Have someone leading you through this.
Yeah, very wise words. Lovely. Lovely one here from Jill Phillips.
Hi, Jill. Yeah, absolutely. So the question was, do you think services should continue to be streamed online after the pandemic? Yeah, absolutely. I think that I was looking at this a minute ago, Lawrence. I think we had about 70 people right now live watching this. I don't know how big your church was and how many chairs you had, but if you'd had 70 people on a Saturday night, I don't know if that would have been your usual crowd. I know at Wimbledon we can have 200 people in the church, but we're more likely to have a dozen on a Sunday morning. Yeah. And we've been, we're reaching thousands of extra people from all over the world. So with this new normality, I think we approach, there is, I think, opportunities to continue to engage with people. Now, I want the churches to be able to open when they're safe to do, and the centres and the halls and everything else that's going on. But I do believe that we should continue to do this. And I think that people should continue to do this. If they're not blessed with having their own church or their own centre, and they can do something from home, as long as they're doing it in the light for the right reasons and they're being sensible about it, that this is an incredible channel and we should continue to do it. I also think that if you think about the average type of person that has the capacity to run a church, it often favours the retired or semi-retired person. And, I'm thinking about my mum and dad in particular here who run Wimbledon and Hatbridge churches with loads of help from really good people. But retired or semi-retired people tend not to be incredibly young. They tend to have worked a little bit to afford to retire. And I think that technology has been a barrier for lots of people that people have had to overcome during this epidemic. And again, I'm focusing on my mum and dad. I'm not tarring everyone suddenly over 60 with the same brush and saying they're all technophobes. I know my mum and dad have been intimidated by this. It's intimidating when you don't fully understand what you're doing. But this is a relatively safe environment, and experimenting online with what we can do. It's a great way of getting out and getting forward and keeping in touch with people. And I applaud people like you, Lawrence, that are continuing to do this, and Spiritual Productions, and all the other people giving service this way.
Yeah, most definitely. Add to that, the wonderful thing is it's not all about mediumship, which has been a real breath of fresh air with the online events going on. There's quite a few mediums who are a little bit reluctant to work online, but they're more than happy to talk philosophically. We've got a local church here do a lovely evening of philosophy. It really is. The format's lovely. I loved working it. You get questions and answers, great energy. And you used to get like 8 or 10 turn up to it every time. Not just for me, I hasten to point out. But yeah, it wasn't well supported. But now, with some of these events that we're doing online, where we're talking about spiritualism, the spiritual aspect of ourselves, with the live views and then watching it on catch-up, we're getting thousands are watching it. And that is so heartwarming, because spiritualism, like yourself, is a way of life and it's a great passion of mine, similar to you, raised in spiritualism. And yet the message is lovely. You know, I will never ever denote a message. The messages serve that purpose of bringing healing for the person receiving the message, also for the spirit giving it. That is wonderful, but it's a key to open up a door to a whole new world. And that door has just been pushed open that little bit further at this time. And with the online events, hopefully that will continue. Right. Here's a question. It piqued my curiosity as well when you said it. So the lovely Lynn Clark.
Hi, Lynn. Good evening to you. So the question was, I said, assuming they've walked the Earth, do you think the guides can come from other planets? I will answer your question, but I'll start it by making a couple of assumptions. The reason I actually said that is assuming they've walked the Earth is I don't believe that every intelligent being, intelligent energy has to come to Earth. I think that Earth, planet Earth as we know it, is very much an experiment. It's all about finding out about ourselves and experiencing everything. I do believe there are intelligent energy, intelligent beings in that place I call heaven, the spirit world, that haven't necessarily been to Earth yet. Perhaps they're waiting as parts of an incarnation, waiting to join an incarnation. At a core level, I know that even from basic GCSE science at school. Thank you, Dr. Abad Barker, Stanley Park. Everything is made of atoms. Every single thing. This table I'm leaning on, this computer, me. Atoms was the Latin word, I believe, and I didn't teach or learn Latin at school, but atom, which was the smallest part. And it was the concept that science came up with. We're going to take a piece of string and we're going to keep cutting it in half until we get to the tiniest possible beat, the atom. That is the smallest thing. And of course, right up until scientists discovered there was things inside the atom, they thought that the atom was absolutely everything. Inside the atom, they know that the atom is in itself even more component parts. Now, I'm not going to go deep into science, other than to say that science know that an atom is energy, and the energy cannot be destroyed. Energy can be transformed, it can be changed, but energy cannot be destroyed. Now, if every single atom is in itself intelligent energy, and it's billions of atoms that make up me, and then part of that, which is my spirit or my soul, which continues to live after the change my body goes through called death, then that in itself is atoms. So when I talk about assuming they've walked the Earth, I'm not assuming, I'm assuming that it is possible to have only ever had an existence as pure energy. I believe that heaven is a place of pure thought, pure energy. And for that reason, not everyone that lives in heaven has to have been through this life on Earth. The second caveat or assumption I will make then is that if planet Earth represents a single grain of sand in the universe, which is continually expanding, then my common sense, or dare I say, my guardian angels say, my instinct is saying there must be other forms of intelligent life on other grains of sand than other planets in other galaxies. Now, assuming that heaven is a place of pure thought and pure energy, and there is only one afterlife, although there may be many houses and mansions within that, then everyone that no longer needs their physical shell to walk in the universe on a planet, to exist in a sort of way, then that personality, that continues in that place we call heaven. So yes, I do think that guides can come from other planets. I myself have had no direct evidence of that. There's a brilliant author, I should have mentioned earlier on, if he's listening, he'll be pretty up to, I didn't mention him, Malcolm Robinson, no family resemblance, but an incredible man, the founder of Strange Phenomena Investigations. And he actually, again, like Conan Doyle, set off to disprove spiritualism as a bunch of frauds and fakes, and ended up believing it so much, became a convert, and is proud to call himself a spiritualist now. But Malcolm's done a lot of incredible research, and one of the areas he researches is about life on other planets and aliens, UFOs, other intelligent energy. So he's a good man to hunt out on Facebook and pick up some of his books. I do think there's life out there. I have not had that direct proof. I've been around other mediums that have spoke about existence on other planets, but I think there are certain things we're just not meant to know yet, because we're either unable to contemplate it or unable to sort of fully understand it. But yes, I do believe that it could be there, and yeah, why not? If you've had the ability of incarnating multiple lives and multiple bodies, and you've done that. Let's assume you would have had to have done it tens of thousands of times on Earth to have experienced everything. Perhaps there is the opportunity to go off and explore it on another planet, or perhaps that's where you start. But that's that core difference between incarnation and reincarnation. So for me, incarnation is exactly what we are now. Ashley Robinson, the spirit and personality, that is me, the incarnation into the new human being, the baby that's sort of born and conceived. Reincarnation is the concept that once I've finished with this body and my spirit goes to heaven, there is the ability to reincarnate in another body. And I think that's the core difference. Thank you.
Lovely. I don't know if you did that intentionally or not, but I just got the next question lined up, which was, what is the difference between incarnation and reincarnation? So there you go, 2 birds, 1 stone. Well done.
Yeah, hopefully Spirit have answered that then as well.
Oh, I think most definitely. Well done. Lovely, lovely. Yes, it is quite a common. It was always a little bit disappointing when you used to get a really good trance stem going, and you had the opportunity to talk direct to spirit through the works of a trance medium, and you used to get that question of, is there life on other planets? Because my reaction is, let's worry about the life on this planet before we worry about the other ones. And also we're physical beings, so we are bound by our physicality. So we would tend to think of physical life on other planets. If, for instance, I'm sat here now in the presence of many, many spirits, we just can't see them. If I look through a telescope at Venus and I can't see anybody, is that uninhabited? I don't know.
Yeah.
We need to send a medium. Are you volunteering? We need to send a medium into space.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I think, absolutely right. And who's to say that before all those atoms come together to form a human conscious and body, that they didn't start off as a rock or a mineral or a fish or a flower or an animal. And I think that the atoms become more and more intelligent. They're bound together and they want to experience everything in each other. It's an entirely different show that this would need to go into some deep philosophy. It would need some science teachers to help us understand the metaphysics of it all.
Very, very, very much so. I'm talking to a couple who are going to do an introduction to quantum physics. I can't remember the exact term, but I know it's quantum, and that's all about the study of energy, which actually is what we are doing. We are. Yeah. So. Lots of questions coming in.
This is great. Thanks, Thomas.
Absolutely fine. We've just gone past 8 o'clock. If you need to finish, whatever, or if you're happy to carry on, fine.
Yeah, great.
Entirely up to you. Yeah, I've got nothing on, surprisingly enough. So, Andrea Turner, used to feel spirit around me all the time, but lately I have felt nothing. Why is that?
Hi, Andrew. Good evening to you. The honest answer is I don't know, because I'm not with you or sort of tuned into you right now. But I gave that example of my sister who said that she couldn't see, she saw nothing, and actually she still saw black, or the colour black, and the black meant something. One of the things that I think is an incredible piece of literature, a sort of poem, is the walking, the footprints on the sand. And Google it; it's quite famous. But the basic concept is someone talking about an existence greater than themselves, e.g., God, a supreme being of some sort. And they say, I often see the 2 footprints in the sand. Almighty God. During the most difficult times of my life, I only saw 1 pair of footprints. Where were you then? And it took me straight back the first time I read that to a school lesson called about World War II, and it was where was God in the concentration camps. And actually, for understanding then that philosophy around Jewish religious philosophy of what happened in the concentration camps, looking at the poem, the footprints, is when you saw only 1 set of footprints, that was where I carried you. That was where I only focused on getting you through that sort of difficult time. And I've spoken to a religious historian that is also Jewish, and I said to him about footprints and this sort of thing at school. And he said to me it was an absolute test. And he's about the same age as me, and he said, and that was the sort of thing that came from my parents and grandparents, and that God was everywhere in the concentration camps, and that we were meant to experience that. Now, I'm not going to get deep into whether or not we have to go through everything, whether or not there's this core destiny, because knowing what we know about the lives we live now, who in their right mind would choose a difficult life? You know, if you walk into the DVD store or the streaming cloud equivalent of heaven, and you can pick absolutely any life, why would you, knowing what we know now, pick a difficult life? Ralph Steadman would say that it's because you wanted to, because you wanted to experience the next thing. And thinking if there were only 4 things you could choose, you know, if you could only choose whether or not you're a man or a woman, you were fit or fat, you were rich or poor, you lived in the north or the south of the earth, that in itself would take you 20, 30 different incarnations of life just to experience those different combinations. And knowing, of course, there are millions of combinations suggests that if you wanted to, perhaps you could incarnate thousands and thousands of times. Other people might do it once. They've worked as a human being on Earth. Yep, done. Job done. Yep. I'm happy. I've experienced enough. I've seen the far strips. So I think that if you used to feel spirits around you at the time, and lately you felt nothing, try and look a bit deeper. See if it's absolutely the right time. The spirit do try and make sure that they're making the right impact on us. I know that when I'm, you know, I've been on a roller coaster of low moods and high moods, and I've suffered a bit of depression and anxiety at times. And I've possibly had less influence from spirit if I've been unable to accept advice or a steer. So you've understood that feeling before you. Find out what's going on in your life now, and try and challenge the status quo and what it is you are experiencing. Thinking about that concept, there's no such thing as nothing. So when you don't feel anything, what is it you do feel? Do you still feel loved, or do you feel fear? Do you feel happiness or anxiety? You know, think about the core emotions. Think about the things you are feeling if you can't feel spirits. And you know, try and go through some of those meditations. There's lots available online free of charge at the moment. Some really good stuff. And Leslie Knight has been running a lot on Friday mornings from our church. Charlie Stubbs as well. Charlie Zenden. So there's a lot of women in spiritualist church. I'm not sure if you've had meditations. You've certainly got people in your circle that have been doing meditations as they are on spirit productions too.
Wonderful. Yeah, very true. That's always a common thing, isn't it? Especially when life is really at its hardest, and you say, well, you know, this is why we're here. I would never have chosen that. Yeah, because you're looking at it through your physical eyes. You're not looking at it through your spiritual eyes. You know, the learning, the opportunity, you know, our suffering gives others opportunities to express healing, express, you know, empathy with us, whatever. You know, and when you look at things through a spiritual eye, you just see the depth of actually where you are. But we're physical, yeah, and we're looking at this time, at this moment, through these eyes, and thinking, I would never have chosen this. Well, yes, you did. Jackie White again. Hello, good old Jack. She's great asking the questions. I love her mind.
Do you only give evidence of the continuation of life in the reading, or guidance as well? What do you think most people want except from reading? So it's a good question, Jackie. And thinking about the subject of tonight, which is the sort of the birth of modern spiritualism, I think that everyone's kind of on their own mission, and they all have their own expectations. When I see our beautiful church at Wimbledon, you know, packed on, say, maybe a special night with one of our more popular mediums, for want of a better word, someone like Ivan Lee, the vast majority of people that have come into that church, and maybe if you've got 150 people in there, they know that the chance of them getting a message is slim. What they enjoy is the entertainment factor, or the comforting factor of being around other people that are getting messages. Now, lots of them are coming there hoping that they're going to be one of the lucky, that they're going to win the raffle. They're going to be one of the 6 or 7 that do get a message in that hour. But actually what they're coming for is to see other people get evidence of life after death. And when people are getting messages, lots of the time, and lots of the messages has been as simple, tell Mum I'm okay, or tell Fred I'm all right, tell Sally I miss her. The messages have not been deeply philosophical. They tend to have been the message that people have needed. So sorry for coughing. That being said, there are lots of regulars, you know, I call my church family, if you like, the same people I see sort of every week on a Sunday at Wimbledon Church. None of them need new evidence of life after death. They all have an absolute belief in a life after death. Yes, it's comforting to see the medium demonstrate just the different flavors of mediumship, the different types and different styles of evidence. I do think there is this growing cadre of people that want advice. They want to steer. perhaps they are struggling, or they're in conflict with their intuition and their instinct, and they're looking for a guide. I think there's this genuine awakening about the way that people want to live their lives, from the choices around the food that they eat and the exercise they take, and cutting out sort of electronic devices. People are making those changes. So in a reading, I try and give the person, certainly in a one-to-one reading, I give the person what I feel they need, which is often then steered by their communicator, which is 3 or 4 absolute concrete proofs of their life after death, so they understand their communicator, and then a reading from that communicator that shows them how they've been around them, what's going on in their life, and where necessary, giving them a bit of advice. Now, I use the word advice as opposed to help. That is because I've been researching the consumer regulations, which are basically Fraudulent Mediums Act and other bits and pieces. And ultimately, what it says in spiritualism, for it to be compatible with consumers, is you mustn't promise to do something or charge someone entrance into the church and then don't do what it says you've promised. So help becomes a strong word, because if you say you can help and whatever you say doesn't help, you're potentially at risk in conflict of doing what you said. Advice is a different thing. And I think that Spirit will give us as much advice if we want. But you have to remember that often it's that personality which they was attracted to their human body that gives that evidence. So if you're really interested in, say, some financial advice and what to invest in, and it's your mum as the communicator, and she knew nothing about finance, she's probably the wrong person to give you financial advice. If you want old Nanny Leal to sort of give you some advice on your dodgy knee, and she wasn't qualified as a doctor, she's probably the wrong person to give you advice about your knee. But she might have been around you, and she might have thought, you know what, I can see you're suffering with that knee, and what I can also see is you've been thinking about calling a doctor and you haven't. So get off all your backside and go to the doctor. That's the sort of advice that Nan can give in those situations. And therefore, the guidance, I think, has to be appropriate.
Very true. You do have some people sort of like hang off every word that a medium says. You know, I've had somebody walk in and say, Spirit told me I've got to wear red today. And I'm thinking, well, Spirit want me to wear red today. They can get it out of the wardrobe and iron it for me. You know, my caveat when I'm working mediumistically is say, right, Spirit's advice is this: if you take it, great. If you don't take it, great. All right. But also, you know, as mediums, and especially when we're on a public platform, that those bits of evidence or bits of advice are never opening up any areas that people would rather not want. And also, you know, we've got our own safeguards. I don't know, probably touching on a bit of an area here. A couple of times I've been shown when a passing is coming, and I'm like, don't show me that. I don't want to see that. It serves no purpose whatsoever to me. Do not show me those things, you know. And you would never, ever, you know, as a medium, you would never, ever give that out. But yeah, it's
personal responsibility.
Very much.
I think it's a big part of it. And yeah, as I said, Spirit will work anybody, but it takes that personal responsibility then and discipline of the medium to trust your instinct, your intuition about what's not appropriate.
Yeah, very true. Ashley, what an absolute joy you've been tonight. Thank you so much. I mean that. I really, really mean that. There's still quite a few questions on the side there. If you're going to flip through them and maybe answer a couple, that'd be lovely. If not, absolutely fine. Wonderful to see so many people on. There was a little bit of a hullabaloo earlier on. It looks like Paul Church is going to get invaded by Wimbledon Church one day. There was this sort of like battle cry about getting a shower bang up. So yeah, fine. I'm game.
It's a nice part of the world, and I will try. We'll try and have a look through the comments and answer your questions. If you did have a particular question for me, then do look me up on Facebook. I've got a page, Ashley Robinson, Spiritualist Medium. Find that on Facebook. Ping me over a message, and I'll do my best to come back to you. Equally, post stuff on the church and the Lawrence. We all have humble opinions. We've all got an answer. We've all got a piece of the jigsaw for you. What you have to do is get all the bits of the jigsaw together and make up your own mind too.
Yeah, very true. Ashley, sir, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Have a good evening. Stay safe.
Definitely. We do pay travelling expenses, so if you just want to submit those, that'll be great. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. It's absolutely lovely to see so many on tonight. Quick few notices. Tomorrow morning, 11 o'clock, we have a divine service, as does Wimbledon Church, have their divine service in the morning as well, also online. Next Wednesday, we have a service at 3 o'clock. What have we got coming up? Oh, we've got one of our nights with the in conjunction with the Spiritist group in Bournemouth on Thursday night. Friday night. Oh, God. I haven't had a drink, honestly. It's probably has a trouble. Friday night, the 29th at 7:30, and we've got a speaker joining us from New York on standards of mediumship. So one of these knock-on effects of having to work online is suddenly the world's your oyster. You know, we are so fortunate that we can really cast our net wide and far. So thank you all, people. Please friend and like Wimbledon Spiritualist Church page as well as the Paul one. That would be wonderful. Keep you up to date. All previous broadcasts are normally stored in the video tab on the left hand side. It's opposite on the camera. Look after yourselves, as Ashley said. Stay safe, stay sane, and personal responsibility. So thank you all. Absolutely beautiful.
Keeping on.